Howdy folks. It's true. I just built a functioning procedural mission generator to demonstrate how a more dynamic approach to No Man's Sky's mission structures might work. You can even try it out for yourself if you'd like. There's a link in the description below, but before you do, I'd like to explain what exactly it does, how I built it, and its intended purpose. I'm Kanaju, and this is how I built a procedural mission generator for No Man's Sky. If you're a longtime viewer of this channel, you probably know that I tend to shy away from too much speculation when it comes to No Man's Sky in particular. That's partially due to my responsibility as a content creator, not to foster unrealistic expectations for a game I have no control over, but it's mostly due to my own lack of self-control. You see, when I get an idea in my head, as one does while speculating, it's extremely difficult for me not to bring it to life. When I originally planned this video, I was just going to show you some flowcharts, wave my hands around, and hope you imagined the same thing I did. But then the idea popped into my head. Hey, if you're going to come up with all these possible objectives and rules and things, why not just build a functioning proof of concept? A prototype that people can experiment with themselves to understand the idea's potential. I tend to have a 2 or 3 day production cycle for my videos, and that includes research, writing a script, recording gameplay, voiceover, editing audio and video, and so on. So building my own functional algorithm for a single video seemed a little unrealistic. Even still, here we are, right? So this video is going to have 2 main sections. First, I'll go over my methodology and the technical aspects of the generator. I love the technical parts of this, and I encourage you to watch the whole video. But if you get bored, I understand. You can skip to the second part of the video with the time codes below. In the second half, I'm going to be exploring the results and seeing what kinds of missions it generates. Either way, should be fun. So let's get started. Let's begin with my goals for this prototype. I set out to explore solutions for one of No Man's Sky's biggest issues, predictability. Specifically, predictability in its procedural missions. Once you run a particular Nexus mission once or twice, you've pretty much seen all it has to offer. Considering how varied the universe is and how many times you're expected to grind Nexus missions, I've always wished these missions were more replayable. So I set out to create an algorithm that could produce compelling variety within a set of repeatable mission types. In order to do so, I needed 3 things: a list of possible objectives, a set of conditions and rules to arrange those objectives, and actual functioning code to bring it to life. I began with the code, as I figured that would help me figure out which rules and thus objectives could be included in this prototype. The idea of building something like this, and in a format I could share publicly, in a matter of days, was a major hurdle to this video's production. Since I've worked with a number of game engines over the years, my first idea was to build a downloadable app of some kind, a standalone executable. However, I realized a web browser-based app would be much easier to share. Luckily, I found perchance.org, a framework for building random text generators that could easily be expanded to create more complex results, aka procedural generation. So you may be wondering, what's the difference between randomly generated and procedurally generated? To be honest, these 2 terms mean pretty similar things and overlap quite a bit. In fact, in different fields, they can mean slightly different things. So for this video, I think it's best to give a quick example of how I'll be using the terms. So here's an example of a random mission generator. Each mission has 3 objectives that are randomly chosen from this pool of possible objectives. Sometimes it chooses the same objective multiple times, sometimes it doesn't. Regardless, it doesn't look like a very fun mission, right? Sure, I could have chosen more fun objectives, but it's still just randomly generated and thus not very engaging. Beneath that, we have an example of a barebones quote-unquote procedural mission generator. Still 3 objectives, and still randomly chosen. However, this time the objectives are chosen based on simple conditions. In this case, if it's the first objective, it chooses it from this list, the second objective from this list, and the third objective from this list. It's slightly more intentional and results in more coherent missions. However, it's also pretty boring. So that's a very basic example. In this context, procedural generation is like random generation with additional conditions that lead to a more intentional end product. Less random, less variety, but more coherent and thus more pleasing to our brains. While technically procedural generation really refers to any process by which software creates content based on rules and conditions, which would include random generation to an extent, when I call something procedural in this video, I'm just referring to something more complex than random. Whew, okay, so that's the boring part, I promise. Now on to the first fun part, creating procedural missions. Perchance.org is a platform for random text generation. As you just saw, it can populate text based on a list of possible options. So in order to build procedural missions, I just had to come up with a bunch of possible objectives to choose from and a set of rules for the generator to follow. Luckily, its logic is built on JavaScript and its visuals are constructed with HTML and CSS, two languages I deal with every day, so the learning curve was quite gentle. Now, I didn't just want to create any procedural missions. I wanted to generate missions that could theoretically exist in the current version of the game. So no procedural missions where you're repairing your ship and suddenly a Gek wizard shows up and opens a portal to the realm of glass and a procedural sentinel monstrosity no one's ever seen before jumps out and shoots down a freighter which crashes into the planet and you fight the survivors among the burning wreckage. Or nothing crazy like that, okay? In order to establish a baseline for what's actually possible, I gathered a list of procedural missions currently in the game. These include Nexus Missions, Mission Board missions, and Bounty Master missions. These are mostly those quote-unquote procedural missions though, like our second example. While they're a bit boring, they provide us with a list of possible objectives to base ours on. Of course, I still took a few liberties, but 99% of the stuff I include is already in the game, just remixed. So let me walk you through the creation of one mission archetype, and then we can play with the rest of them. After looking at all of these currently available mission types, I noticed a good salvage mission seemed to be missing. So I began with a mission type I call Advanced Freighter Salvage. I started with the easy stuff, the mission name, client, and reward, to sort of learn the ropes. I created a list of possible options for each field to randomly select from. The words in the curly brackets are also randomly selectable. So while there are only 5 options for titles in this particular prototype, there are actually over 40 possible title variations. Additionally, Perchance allows me to set the probability of individual options relative to the rest. Being able to set different probabilities will be key to creating compelling variety. I used it here to create a very low chance of player civilizations being the listed client, as a fun little Easter egg. There's also a tiny chance of Quicksilver being offered as a reward. Now, I'm no master of probabilities on a galactic scale, so Hello Games would probably set these values differently. So if you ran this mission type 100 times, you might only get Quicksilver twice, but when you did, it would be quite the surprise. Of course, if you're lucky, you might get it 100 times, but hey, that's statistics. This idea of having very low chance variations is something that plenty of games, No Man's Sky included, use to entice players to replay content, whether it's a legendary weapon in Destiny or a perfect ship in No Man's Sky. Or a zany plot twist in my procedural missions, as you'll soon see. Rare occurrences drive engagement, and currently, No Man's Sky's missions lack this sort of variety. So, how do you implement this search for rarity into a mission's objectives? Well, there are plenty of ways actually. So let me show you what I did. I first needed to establish the main objective that these would sort of be based around, like a skeleton. Since it's freighter salvage, I looked at the 4 possible ways to salvage a freighter currently in the game. You have a crashed freighter on the surface, a crashed freighter underwater, the destroyed freighter's cargo pods in space, and derelict freighter dungeons. This is where the proc gen kicks in. I include all 4 possible locations as archetypes, but I assign them different probabilities. So there's a 72.5% chance you'll be sent to salvage a regular derelict or crashed freighter. So that'll be what you do most of the time. Then there's an 18% chance you'll be sent underwater, and a rare 9% chance you'll be sent into a full derelict freighter dungeon. So you could run this mission 4 times in a row and have 4 completely different experiences. In fact, that's the idea, right? So once you know which freighter type to salvage, the algorithm selects a threat for your mission. For the space derelict, there are 6 possible scenarios, ranging from routine salvage with no threats, to pirates, to abyssal horrors. each one with a different probability. For example, most space derelict missions will either go smoothly or involve pirates. However, there's a low chance that sentinels might get involved, and a very, very slim chance that living ships will be there to greet you. Each one of these categories carries its own branching paths, plot twists, and resolutions. In every case, you still have to gather the cargo from the pods, but the circumstances around you can vary wildly. Some pirates will attack on sight, while others can be bribed. Sentinels can be defused with a defense chit. Pirates might attack you on your way back to the client as opposed to when you're salvaging. Not to mention the final drop-off location is also procedurally chosen. And that's just the space version. The crashed freighter might be swarming with corrupted sentinels, or regular ones. There might be toxic fumes engulfing the whole wreck, or biological horrors could spring up from the ground as you're digging up crates. Pirates could attack from the air, or freighter security might still be intact. Mini-fiends might have survived the crash. For the underwater version, you might run into abyssal horrors, or the water could be radioactive. Even the derelict dungeon has extra modifiers and possible scenarios. Not counting every possible player decision or end location, I counted over 90 possible mission variations just in this single archetype. That's nearly 100 different scenarios a player might find themselves in when they click accept. What's important to remember though is that while these missions might include a surprise or two, these surprises are used sparingly. A twist isn't very twisty if it happens 50% of the time after all. The other important key to keeping these missions coherent is that in every case, your core objectives are the same. You have to reach a freighter wreck, recover some cargo, and deliver it to the client. Whether that wreck is radioactive, swarming with jellyfish, or attractive to pirates, well, that's the spice that makes it exciting. So after hearing all that, you might be wondering how a mission like this would fit into the game. It's longer than traditional Nexus missions, it has the potential to be much more difficult, but placing it in a space station would limit it to single player only. To me, the solution is obvious. We should bring back the Galactic Commission Station. For those unaware, prior to the Nexus, we used to be able to accept multiplayer missions directly from our freighter bridge. These were a great way to play with friends, and you never had to worry about randos joining you. My dream, again, this is just a dream, but it would be the addition of the Galactic Commission Station to our settlements. Or, alternatively, our settlement terminal could function as the Galactic Commission Station. This has a few benefits. It would give players a reason to return to their settlement regularly. If unlocked only after your settlement is complete, it would make settlements more desirable and ensure that only players with some time in the game can access them. And of course, it would function as a pseudo-private lobby, as only those physically present would be able to join your missions. So, with that fantasy in mind, you can see here I've created 6 new mission types that could be accessible from your settlement. There would likely be a daily limit like with frigate expeditions and Quicksilver missions, but given their longer length, that shouldn't bother most players. Anyways, that's enough talk. Let's get to the fun stuff, taking the generator for a test drive.
Get ready for unscripted Kanaju.
Alrighty, here I am on the DSTN website. I'm going to navigate over to resources and then procedural mission generator. Alrighty. So you can find this at deep-space-travel-network.com/mission generator, but I'll put the link in the description. So this is a functioning prototype for what we were just discussing. Here we have the 6 missions. I labeled all of them advanced to sort of differentiate them from any existing missions, but in reality it's really just pirate hunt, right? But if you scroll down, it has a little description. So for all of you watching this, and that includes anyone from Hello Games, feel free to use anything that's in here, anything on the website. All this stuff I provide an open source license, essentially. Irrevocable, perpetual, no attribution, no compensation required. You can just pretty much take whatever you like from here, and I actually encourage it. That would be great. Alright, so let's take a look at what this can really do, right? So we'll open up right here, Advanced Freighter Salvage. Title, free for the scrapping. Client, reliable recovery. Reward, 808 nanites. That's pretty good, right? So instead of having like flavor text like you would normally have when viewing a mission, what I've done here is build a description of the mission's objectives. So this is sort of like a description of how the mission would run. So here it says you must salvage the cargo from a sunken freighter on this world. So the stuff that's bolded in this description, that usually means that is like more procedural than the rest, if that makes sense. So sunken freighter is bolded because it's letting you know this is an underwater mission. So then it continues, upon reaching the sunken crash site, your ship registers a high amount of toxicity localized to the wreckage. Retrieving the cargo will be dangerous. And then after that, you can either sell the salvage yourself, which will fail the mission, but if it's really lucrative, that might be a good idea. Or you can deliver to the client's contact aboard the space station, which is also procedural. Then mission complete. So that's a very basic mission, right? So you might think, well, that doesn't sound that exciting, Kanaju. Well, let's generate a new mission and see what the difference would be. Here we have about 1 million units, and it says you must salvage the cargo from another sunken freighter, actually. But this time, the wreckage is full of jellyfish. Okay, so again, statistics, those are very similar missions. We'll generate a third one, which is also a sunken freighter. This is actually pretty unlikely, but in this case, it's also swarms of... Oh, on a neighboring world. I was going to ask what's the difference. But in this case, the reward is 1 Salvage frigate module. And the client is 1 Gex junk. So take that as you will. Let's see here. Alright, so here's a different one. As you can tell, very different. You need to salvage the cargo from a destroyed freighter in the same system. So, upon arriving to the wreckage, you're hailed by a surviving starship. And they claim to have been a security escort. However, they do not provide any evidence. So, you can leave them stranded or you can repair the ship. If you repair the ship, they immediately attempt to flee the scene. You can either engage them in combat or let them go. And then after salvaging what you could from the wreck, you can either sell the salvage yourself or deliver it to the client's contact aboard the space station. Pretty simple, right? But down here it has an extra thing that says if you help the stranded pilot, and they were a part of the crew, because there's a version of this where they're actually a pirate, then the client will reward you. So in this case, if you helped him, and you didn't shoot him down, then the client will reward you. If you left him stranded, no bonus. If you repaired his ship, but then shot him down and he attempted to flee, well, you would also get no bonus. So, yeah. So that's a very different mission, but it's the same mission type, right? And then here we press it again, and it's a crashed freighter on an actual planet surface. So it says once you reach the crash site, you're immediately attacked by pirates. So you can recover the cargo while they're shooting at you, or you can take them out first. But that's sort of like the little modifier on that. Again, you click this again, and it's another pirate thing. Oh, but this one's in space. So you can either give up the derelict and abandon your mission, or decline and fight the pirates. And then after that, you have the basic ending as well. So as you go through this, you get a bunch of different opportunities, right? So here's one where it says you salvage the remaining cargo without incident. So nothing happens. That's pretty easy. And this one is also without incident. That's pretty lucky. So this is a rare one. It says upon arriving, you're ambushed by hostile living ships. If you're in an actual living ship, or your fleet containing a living frigate is present in the system, they will leave you with a warning. Otherwise, the living ships attack. And after dealing with them, you get the basic end state. So this is what I mean by using the same framework, but putting in a lot of variables that would surprise people. Things that you wouldn't see very often, like living ships, which would be exceedingly rare. In this case, you have a sunken freighter, but there's a lot of radiation around. Here we have a destroyed freighter, but ambushed by pirates. But these give you the option to barter if you'd like to. So that's slightly different than the other ones. And so that's the thing. A lot of these will be very similar, but then some of them will be very different. For example, we haven't seen any that require you to explore a derelict. We haven't seen any where the pirates attack you after you've already salvaged the stuff. And there's a bunch of odd ones. There's one where those Titan worms burrow out of the ground when you're trying to salvage the cargo. There's a bunch of weird ones. But this was just to sort of give you an example of how different freighter salvage missions could go. So if we move on to Pirate Hunt, title The Problem with Pirates, the hardcore Vax client. Here you have, units and stuff. I pretty much use very similar rewards for each of these missions because honestly, that's a matter of balancing, which is too complicated to get into. But if we look at this mission, if you know standard pirate hunt missions, you accept it, you fly out into space, you pulse, you reach the pirates, you fight them, and you return to get your reward. And that happens every single time. Sometimes it's 2 waves, sometimes it's 4 waves, sometimes they're really hard, sometimes it's really easy. But you fly out there, pulse, fight, and come back. And that's really boring. So this advanced pirate hunt is more like a bounty hunting mission. So here it says you've been tasked with hunting. Oh, there's an error there. There's supposed to be a procedural pirate name.
Wait, future Kanaju here. I have fixed the pirate name generator on the live site, so go check it out after the video.
But you must track them down and eliminate them in order to receive payment. The client has sent you coordinates for a trade depot that the bounties gang is known to frequent. Perhaps someone there can offer more information. So here you go to the trade depot, you ask around, and you find someone that may know something, but you gotta grease their palms, right? So you can pay them in units, nanites, or if you're a high enough mercenaries rank, you threaten them. After that, you discover the location of the pirate gang, which in this case, it's procedural, is a local settlement. And after you defeat them, that ends the mission. So that's a little more involved, right? You might think, oh, how varied can that be? Well, if we press it again, in this case, they give you the coordinates for a manufacturing facility that recently refused to pay the target's protection fee. So, in this case, you don't have to talk to anyone. As soon as you get there, the gang is attacking the facility as expected. However, you would think that would be the end of it. But after seeing how effective you were in combat, the target flees to another system. So, you were able to recover the coordinates and you chase them to that system, and then you defeat them in combat. So again, it's a little more involved, but you don't know how it's going to go necessarily. This one is similar in that you go to a trade depot and you find them attacking there, but in this case, the target just fled to their hideout in the same system. This one is a planetary archive. And again, this one you have to pay someone, and it says they're raiding a different planetary archive. And there's all kinds of different ones. Like this one says you get the data for a freighter that's carrying cargo, often stolen by the target's gang. So, they're obviously going to target this one. You go there, you defend a freighter, which is a different kind of gameplay than fighting in atmosphere or out in space. And then it turns out that they fled to a remote part of space. So then you have to follow them and you engage in the final battle. And again, these are just different ways. It makes the mission more dynamic, it's more surprising, more engaging. And these feel more like actual bounties, like actual pirates doing things versus just enemies to shoot down, right? This one you have to go to an outlaw space station to gather information. In this case, this one's quite similar to a couple that we saw. And there's some really odd ones I was hoping would show up here, but they have a very low chance. So, like there's some where the target will flee through a black hole, right? And then what happens on the other side will be one of a few different things. There's one I call, it's an archetype I call Goose Chase, where you keep taking out his forces and he just flees to another system, and you have to do that like 3 times. And it's really, really rare. But when it happens, I can just see people just sort of rolling their eyes, like, not this again. So it's stuff like that, where it's like, sometimes it's a very rare chance of something going wrong, but sometimes it's a very rare chance of something going right. So there's a rare version of this mission where as soon as you leave your settlement to go look for them, they just hail your ship. They're like, hey, I heard you were looking for me. And they just challenge you to a duel, just one-on-one. And it's like, that would be the easiest mission ever, the easiest money. Stuff like that is really interesting. So these are just some examples of how that could work. And I encourage you to actually come through here and click through. Like this one says, the client sent you coordinates for a giant skull where the pirates are known to frequent. And in this case, you go there, that's their hideout, and you take out the guy there. So that's really cool. But let me move on to another. Sorry, I just get so distracted. Let me move on to the advanced rescue mission. So this is sort of based on the find a missing person mission that currently exists. It says the client has tasked you with locating a particular individual. They transmit the individual's last known location, a remote region of space. So this means you gotta pulse somewhere. You reach the coordinates and discover a pirate-controlled monitoring station. The target's nowhere to be seen when suddenly you're hailed by pirates. You ask them if they've seen the target, because why not, right? They respond that they killed that pilot cycles ago, and that you'll face the same fate if you don't pay up. And then in this case, it says you're presented with the usual pirate options, which basically means you can barter, you can pay them off, or you can fight. And then after dealing with the pirates, you transmit, the target's fate to the client, who thanks you and pays you. And it's like, that one's kind of grim, right? But these can go a million different ways. Like in this case, it says their last known location was the local space station. So you go in there, you ask around, and then you find someone who spoke to the target, but they need a little bit of money to share what they know, right? So after you pay them, it turns out the target was following a trade route to a nearby trading post. However, they were on their way out of the system, so you have to reach the location in time and then find the actual target, on the ground. You have to speak to all the NPCs. So it's one of those things where the other mission was a pirate mission and you discover that they were killed. In this case, you're actually under time crunch to find someone before they leave the system. And it says here, once you find them, they actually, they don't want to be found. So they offer you 12,000 units to look the other way. Now, if you scroll up here, the reward for this mission is almost 400,000 units. So, this is procedural to the point where they can actually offer you a lot more than the client in some cases, but it'll often be less. And then here you have full freedom. You can take the money and turn them in anyways. You can take the money and let them go. You can let them go for free, or you can accept the money and abandon your mission. So you can end this mission however you like, and that's completely different from the last version. If we click generate a new mission again, in this case, you go to the local space station again, but in this case, they were on their way to an observatory. So you go to the observatory, and it turns out that they were there and they left already. So you check the console and you download their intended flight path and realize there's a distress beacon that lines up perfectly. So you rush to the site and you discover a crashed ship. In this case, the target appears to have survived the crash and is grateful to see you. So you explain the situation and they happily transmit their coordinates. Now, these are all very different missions. In one case, it's timed. In one case, it's combat. In this case, it's just following a trail. But sometimes you'll arrive at that crash site and they're dead. Sometimes you'll arrive there and they don't want to be found. So in each instance, there are a lot of different branches that can stem from this. Let's see what this one is. Pirate options. Last seen on their way to an observatory. Oh, in this case, they're just at the observatory. You caught up to them in time. So even that's like a different... Again, so it's the kind of thing where you start this and you're thinking, oh, I know how this mission goes. They'll be at the observatory. And they are, right? But then another time, you're like, oh man, it's the same mission. You get to the observatory and, they're not there, right? But you find their crashed ship and they're like, oh, I'd happily go, but I need you to repair my ship or do this or that. So you never know how far these missions are going to go. In some cases, I believe they might be underwater. Let's see here. Clicking through here, distress beacon. They were killed by pirates. That one's quite common. This one, they're flying towards a minor settlement. Oh, and this one... See, this one's completely different. You're given the coordinates for a planetary archive where they were last seen. You get there, but it's under attack by pirates, so you have to defeat the pirates and then land. And once you land, you're able to ask around. And in this case, because you took out the pirates, no one's trying to hustle you, right? They'll give you the information freely. But they tell you that the target was heading into the wilderness on foot. So then you have to find them like at one of these remote locations, like not near a building, just in the wilderness, which is a thing that exists in the game. And then again, they might be happy to see you, they might not be. You never know how it's going to go. So again, that's a different mission where you're combining the combat and the searching, and then you have to find the approximate location. Since they're so small, you probably have to land your ship and walk around. So it's one of those things where this mission again can go so many different ways. And you really feel like you're looking for a missing person as opposed to the usual mission types, which do have some variation to them. I will admit The missing person missions do a variation, but they don't have that much variation at the moment. So this is a lot more exciting. Look, in this case, you get to a pirate-controlled monitoring station, and the target ship is floating there lifeless. You assume they're the victim of pirates, no pirates show up, so you report the situation to your client, and you're paid for your time. So it could go a ton of different ways, and spoiler alert, there's actually a rare instance where the pirates that attack you, the pirate that hails your ship is actually the target, and you can either... you can actually talk them out of their life of piracy, or you can just take them out and then report that. Again, there's so many weird things that can happen. So those are 3 missions that could theoretically be placed anywhere. But the next 3 missions are settlement missions. So right now we don't really have any procedural settlement missions, which I think is a huge missed opportunity considering they're such cool location. So I came up with 3, and each one of these has a benefit to your settlement. So in this case, if you do a settlement defense mission, you lower the sentinel alert level of your settlement. In this case, if you do settlement repairs, you lower the maintenance cost by a little bit. And if you do settlement recruiting, you can add 1 or 2 settlers, which may not sound like a lot, but considering how hard it is to get your settler population to max, this would be very welcome, believe me. So let's start with settlement defense. An imminent danger. Client your settlement, of course. So you must defend the settlement from a full sentinel assault. The sentinels throw everything they have at you, beginning the assault with 3 sentinel quadrupeds, and each wave brings more mechanical menaces. So it says here, with the settlement safe for now, the townspeople demand more preemptive measures to be taken. They recommend breaking into a sentinel facility in order to weaken local sentinel forces. And then once you do that, the mission is complete. So right now, when sentinels attack, it's just the corrupted ones, and you defeat like 1 wave of them and that's it. And that might still occur. However, as I hope you'll see, these advanced settlement defense missions will be a lot more varied. So this is actually a good example to start with because it's very similar to what we're used to. You have sentinels attacking. In this case, it's full sentinel assault, and it has 3 quadrupeds to start, making it extra hard. Not bad, right? And then you have a bonus objective of breaking into a sentinel facility. But let's see what happens if we generate a new mission. In this case, it's actually pretty similar. Let me click that again. Alright, so you must rid the settlement of an infestation of biological horrors. So, in this case, this is like a time survival. You have to survive 3 minutes of biological horrors attacking. And then once you do that, the settlement's safe for now. However, they were able to track the source of the infestation to a nearby abandoned building. So you go down there and you destroy another nest or 2. And then that's that mission. So again, it's still a defense mission, still combat oriented, but it's a different kind of enemy that you would normally never see in a settlement. However, Hello Games have demonstrated, especially in the Leviathan expedition, that they can spawn biological horrors pretty much anywhere. So this is something that I could conceivably see added to the game. So if we click it again, it's another one of these instances, but it's a slightly longer time you have to survive, so it's a little tougher. In this one, pirates are assaulting your settlement, so this is a ship combat mission. A little bit different. In this case, it's another full sentinel assault. Another full sentinel assault, but it says this one is by the books, so no extra sentinels at the beginning. And then the bonus objective is to take out a sentinel pillar, which should be easy if you lower the sentinel alert level. So in this case, this one's really rare. It says you must rid the settlement of an infestation of jellyfish. So basically, those green jellyfish you see in derelict freighters? Well, in this case, it just spawns 16 jellyfish, and you kind of have to find them throughout the settlement. It's almost like hide and seek, right? You're looking around, you're checking all the rooms to see where they might have spawned, and once you eliminate all of them, the townspeople rejoice. So this is a really easy mission, but it's so infrequent. I forget what the percentage chance of this is, but it's single digits, maybe even less than 1%. So if you get this, it'll just be like, it almost feels like a filler episode of like a TV show or something. You're like, what is going on? And it's the kind of thing that if you weren't like watching me demonstrate all these different variations to you, you might play 100 missions before you ever see this. And once this happens, it's going to be the coolest surprise ever. And again, it's a break, right? So you're still getting all the benefits you would get from a longer mission, but it's surprisingly short, most likely, or it could be difficult. This one is, again, biological horrors, full sentinel assault, biological horrors. That was a tougher one, 4 minutes. So sentinel assaults and biological horrors are going to be the top two most common ones that you see here. And then, so we click through, we get a lot of that. This one is interesting. It says defend the settlement from 4 waves of corrupted sentinels. So this is really similar to the regular corrupted sentinels, but it's 4 waves. So it's like a more challenging and or tedious version, but you get a lot better rewards, right? This one again, biological horrors, sentinel assault. I'm looking for some rarer ones. 5 waves of corrupted sentinels, 2 waves. As you can see, it can vary in a couple different ways. Sentinel quadrupeds, biological horrors. Here we go. You must rid the settlement of an infestation of Titan worm larvae. 12 hungering tendrils have sprung up around the settlement and require your multi-tool to remove. Be quick though, if you can't cut down all of them in 3 minutes, they'll spring up again. So, as you can tell, this is a completely new mission type, essentially. 12 of these things have spawned throughout the settlement, luckily outside of the building, so you don't have to search all the buildings, but you have to take them out in 3 minutes. And if you don't, they'll spring right back up and you'll have to try again. Or maybe you'll fail. I don't know what the end state of that would be. But, so it's kind of like whack-a-mole. You have to go around the settlement finding these things and taking them out. And then once you do that, the townspeople track the source of the infestation to a Titan worm burrow, which most people won't have these on their planets, but the game can spawn one of these since they're not a building. They're more like a thing. They're more like a plant or a rock. So these can actually be spawned nearby, for instance. And then maybe you go over there and you clear that out, and then that's the mission. So again, it's a little more difficult, a little bit different, because you're dealing with a timed, not survival, but a timed challenge, which is, again, another type of gameplay. And it's, again, so rare that when you do get it, you're going to be wondering what the heck is going on. And the other thing is, even though this is an enemy you've likely seen before, you've never seen them in your settlement before. So this is the kind of thing that would, again, feel novel, feel surprising, but it's not surprising in a way that's like if you click a YouTube video and the thumbnail doesn't match the content. It's surprising in a, oh, I didn't know this is what you could mean by settlement defense. And that's the idea with a lot of these. So these are always going to be combat focused, but you know, it varies in difficulty, it varies in challenge, and even if you're in your ship or just shooting little jellyfish. And you never know if there'll be a bonus objective or what that'll be. So that's the Advanced Settlement Defense mission. Perils on all sides. So if we move on, we have the Advanced Settlement Repairs mission. Now this one's a lot of fun. Now, maintenance sounds like it would be a very boring mission, right? You walk up to the console, you put in the materials, and it's fixed or whatever. We currently have like fix broken machinery missions, and they're not that fun, I'm sorry. And these won't always be that fun, but sometimes they will. So in this case, it says, looks like the water tower sprung a leak, right? But it looks like a simple fix. So 5 carbon nanotubes ought to do the trick. Or a repair kit. So with the leak fully repaired, things are back to normal. That is actually the easiest one you could possibly get. If we click it again, we see something completely different. One of your settlement technicians needs a set of blueprints in order to repair some of their previous work. So they tell you that the blueprint they're looking for can be found in a secure facility they used to service. They provide you with coordinates, but you're going to have to actually break in and do that whole shebang, right? And then after you do that, obviously you retrieve the blueprint and you complete the mission. So that, again, is different. Instead of using materials or just walking over to a water tower, you have to go to a facility, break in, so it's a little more of a combat mission, and then bring back the blueprints. Here, it looks like a completely different mission. So while investigating a sudden power loss, a settlement technician realized part of the settlement's power grid is somehow jerry-rigged to a nearby network. And while you might want to do something about that later, in order to restore power right now, you are going to have to restore that connection. So, in order to complete the operation, you have to reach a designated building within a short time period. If you've played the exocraft technician missions, this is pretty much like that. Once you start the mission, it'll give you like a timer, and it's a race, most likely an exocraft race. And you have to reach a designated, in this case, abandoned building in time. Otherwise, it resets the location, and you have to reach another one within the quote-unquote network, right? So this is a time trial. Again, it's a different thing, and then once you do that, the system's repaired. In this case, on battery, that one's very simple. Here's here's one. So it says we'll need to order this part, right? We can't make it ourselves, and it'll cost 168,000 units to replace. Now you can pay for the part yourself, be a good overseer, or you can have the settlers pay for it and just add it to the settlement debt. Which, if you're playing this like you're new to settlements and you're poor and you get this, you're probably gonna unload that debt onto your people. Now, what I love about this is actually one of the plot twists. So you do that, you repair the generator, and then whoops, looks like that generator just wasn't meant to last. And so basically the generator breaks anyways after you pay for that expensive part. And now you have to buy another generator, which costs 800,000 units, which again, you can pay for yourself, or you can add it to the settlement debt. So this is an instance where that's like a possible plot twist you can have. So after you complete your repairs, it could just break again anyways, and you just have to replace the whole thing or hire a plumber or whatever, and it just costs a lot more, which I think is funny, because this actually has a very, very low chance of happening, like 1%, which is why it's so silly. Which some people will hate it, some people will love it, but either way, you're gonna remember that. You know what I mean? The time you tried to fix your toilet and you had to hire a plumber because it didn't work. Or in this case, look, it seems that your plumbing's backed up. It's believed to be a market causing the issue. So you have to go to each market, depending on how many are in your settlement, and figure out which one has an issue. There might be a little pipe thing to interact with, or I don't know how this will work, but you go to each building that's a market type. So after searching a few different buildings of that type, you finally arrive at the source of the problem. A pipe is clogged with what looks like over 26,000 viscous fluids, which that's a lot. So you'll need to actually clear that out in order to restore flow. You can destroy that stuff, which is easy, or keep it for yourself if you want to, refine it into something more valuable. But it's such a high amount that you need the inventory space, and it'd be a pain in the butt to refine. So it's one of those things where it's pretty simple. You just clear the stuff out of the muck after finding the clogged pipe. But then you have to choose what to do with it. And you never know what it's going to be clogged with, right? It could be clogged with faecium, maybe. It could be clogged with, maybe someone dropped a Gek relic down the toilet, right? So you're going to get different kinds of missions like that, where, again, you don't know what you're going to be doing for your thing. Here it says that they require a set of technology blueprints, but that they left it with a former associate. So instead of breaking into a secure facility, you have to go to a trade depot to find that associate. And you go there and they're like, yeah, I have the blueprint, but I'm going to need something in exchange. So you could either give them materials or money, right? Whatever is easier for you. And that gives you the blueprint. So it's like it's a different kind of mission requiring different materials. And there's just so many here. I won't go over all of them. Again, I encourage you to click through these yourself and see, because there's a good amount of variety here, I have to say. Of course, right? I made it, I have to say, but still. All right, and finally, the final mission type is Advanced Settlement Recruiting. So again, this is really important for increasing your settlement's population, which is quite difficult to do. So it says here, the settlement's looking to grow and has tasked you with recruiting new settlers. You decide a personal appeal might work. You head on over to the local space station in order to look for potential residents. So you're just walking around asking people, and you find someone who's open to joining. However, they tell you that their ship needs repairs in order to make the journey. So again, you provide them with a repair kit, wiring looms, or pay for it to be repaired. And afterwards, they join your settlement. That's pretty easy, right? Wonder what else could occur. So in this case, you realize that a message should do the trick. So you reach a nearby transmission tower and transmit an advertisement. Someone gets your transmission and says, hey, that sounds great. And they join your settlement. So those are actually two very simple versions of this. Let me see what else. Okay, here's one. So you reach a nearby radio antenna and send a message, right? You find someone willing to join your settlement. However, they tell you that their ship needs repairs. So this is like a radio version of that last one. So here's the fun part. After you repair their ship, they actually double cross you, and a squadron of pirates descends on your settlement. So you gave away your position, now they're attacking. So now this is a combat mission. But after you defeat the pirates, one of their associates gives up their life of crime and joins you. So you still get your extra settler. This one, you go to a planetary archive instead of a space station. And again, you find someone who needs help repairing their ship. And this one's actually quite similar to the other one. Let's see here. Nearby trade post, secure, need repairs. And again, this is how statistics work. Sometimes you get very similar ones. In this case, while you're discussing how to get a new settler, you get a distress call from a nearby pilot, and then you reach their crashed ship. And once you help repair their ship, they join your settlement, right? So that's like a different version of this. And again, some of these are going to be very similar. Some of them are going to be quite different. This one, someone agrees to join, and their ship doesn't need repairs. They just fly right on over, right? Easy peasy. This one goes to an observatory, so you're not asking a bunch of people, just one. Another one, you find someone, and they're like, hey, I'd love to join your settlement, but there are a lot of pirates around. Could you clear out the pirates first? So you do that, and then they join your settlement. So, again, at this point, you probably see what I'm getting at. And you can try this for yourself, but you have the basic objectives in each of these. You're going to salvage something and bring it back to the client. You're going to defend the settlement and make sure it's secure. You're going to put out a message or try and reach a new settler. And in each one of these, you know what you're supposed to be doing. You kind of know what you're going to get into, but at the same time, you don't. And every single mission has a lot of potential to go sideways, to go surprisingly easily, to just go zany in some cases. This is the kind of variety, dare I say it, that I would love to see in No Man's Sky's procedural missions. And I hope that this prototype, this proof of concept, demonstrates one version of how it might work. You know, perhaps Hello Games are working on an even more advanced AI-based system at the moment. Or maybe they're working on some kind of tools to allow players to build missions. Who knows, right? But I just thought it'd be a lot of fun to share this with you. And again, I encourage you to go through here, click through them, see for yourself what kinds of zany combinations the generator can come up with. And if you'd like to modify this or use it for yourself, or even just take the text and copy it directly for something in any commercial work, doesn't matter. Oh no, my computer's gonna die. Anyways, you can click this thing at the bottom and you get an editable open source version. Oh my gosh, I need to stop recording. My computer's gonna die. No. Alright, so that was a demonstration of how I would improve procedural missions in No Man's Sky. While this proof of concept was a lot of fun to put together, I can't imagine how difficult it would actually be to implement. For starters, it has over 700 lines of text that would need to be translated in every supported language. That alone would take forever, plus cost money. And then there's the actual programming. They would need to build functional code for each scenario. And while I would hope that HG build everything with hooks and variables as opposed to hard values, I know sometimes they have to work with what they've got. So you've got hundreds of lines of text to translate, hundreds of lines of code to write and test, but then you also have hundreds of gameplay scenarios to play test. And I can't even imagine all the possible bugs that could appear in a system like this. I mean, and then you include the fact that quote-unquote new procedural missions isn't a very sexy headline for gaming press, and that fans expect new updates every couple months, and suddenly this somewhat reasonable idea looks like a lot more trouble than you bargained for. I mention this because I often get comments wondering why Hello Games doesn't add this or that, but the reality is that they'd probably love to, but they have to pick and choose their battles. That said, procedural quests and dungeons are still at the top of my wish list, but I understand if we don't see them anytime soon. In the meantime, I'll be dreaming. Speaking of which, let me know if you enjoyed this video. I had a lot more complicated ideas for this video that I ended up cutting for time, but if y'all enjoy these kinds of prototypes and explorations, I'd love to attempt something more ambitious in the future. The easiest way to let me know is to leave a like or dislike, but comments are definitely encouraged. And don't forget to subscribe if you don't want to miss more deep dive No Man's Sky content. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.